Coming soon to own on
YouTube and Twitch.
DVD.
The Toolbox Killer. A case so brutal it reshaped America's law. I don't know what this is about, but obviously this is a real life case, so I'm probably not gonna be joking too crazy, but jokes will fly because bygones are bygones. Let it's time to heal. Oh, and I didn't mean that sounded insensitive, but you know what I mean. Let's get straight into it.
On October 31st of 1979, 16-year-old Shirley Lynette Ledford was making her way home from a Halloween party in the Sunland Tujunga neighborhood of the San Fernando Valley. Having been unable to get a ride home from the party, Shirley found herself having to hitchhike and was standing outside a gas station when she suddenly...
Wait, how'd you get there? Like, how the fuck you get there? That's like one thing I never understood. Going somewhere with an undetermined ride back. Oh, I'm just gonna get there and find a way. Like, what you mean?
recognized someone who drove up to the pumps. His name was Lawrence, and Shirley knew him through his frequent visits to a restaurant where she worked as a part-time waitress. As Lawrence got out of his van to pump gas, Shirley approached them, asking if he might be able to give her a ride home. He accepted, but when she opened the van's sliding door and climbed into the cavernous interior, she found she was not alone. Lawrence was in the company of a friend named Roy, two men whose van held secrets darker than she could ever imagine.
Like, I don't know how far she is from her house, but she did, like, as soon as you open that van and it was another man in there, you would have been better off just walking home. You 100% would have been just better off walking home.
As Lawrence drove Shirley home, Roy offered Shirley some cannabis to smoke. She refused, knowing she was going to be back in the presence of her parents at any moment. But as the van continued to drive for longer than the journey required, Shirley began to wonder what route they were taking.
And
Lawrence
just like
assured
that,
her that he was just avoiding heavy traffic. But when he stopped the van and announced that they'd arrived at their destination, Shirley didn't recognize the street outside the van. She turned to Roy, intending to ask where they'd taken her, only to see he'd produced a knife. He told her if she screamed, she was dead. Shirley looked to Lawrence. She knew him. He'd been kind to her. Surely he'd have the humanity to stop whatever Roy was threatening to do. But when she saw that he was a part of it, how she'd walked right into a trap of his creating, we can only imagine the kind of horror she felt. Shirley was bound and gagged with construction tape, and Lawrence sat in the rear of the van with her as Roy drove them up to the San Gabriel Mountains. With the roar of traffic masking any noise, Lawrence removed the construction tape gag from Shirley's mouth before he began to torment her. He beat her, slapped her, and mocked her mercilessly, demanding that she say something. And it's clear that what Lawrence wanted...
how? You bound and gagged her. How you want her to talk? I hate dumb niggas,
was
man.
to hear her beg. He wanted her to express the...
And that's why, bro, you can't give him, bro. You gonna kill me, just kill me, bro. Go ahead, bro. I'm not gonna just sit here and beg. I know you're not gonna let me go. I'm looking you dead in your eyes, and I know who the driver is. There's no universe where you let me go. You gonna kill me, just kill me. I'm not gonna beg.
terror and the helplessness she felt. He wanted to soak up the agony of her torment. And when she failed to find the words, he found screams to be just as satisfying.
Oh my God.
He began torturing her with a claw hammer and a pair of pliers, smashing her elbows, twisting at chunks of her flesh until blood flowed. When Shirley began to scream, Lawrence simply told her to scream louder, knowing all would be drowned out by the sound of the traffic outside. When Lawrence grew bored of torturing Shirley, he placed a wire coat hanger around her neck, which he then tightened with his pliers. By this time, Shirley was said to be almost catatonic and barely reacted as the coat hanger grew tighter and tighter around her throat. The 16-year-old died with her eyes open that Halloween night, and as her body began to grow cold, Lawrence and Roy had to decide what to do with her. It was then that Lawrence had the idea to dump Shirley's body on the front lawn of a random family home, the goal being to generate as much media attention as possible. Roy agreed, and the pair drove to a house in Sunland where the men dragged Shirley's lifeless body from the van before tossing her into a bed of ivy. Roy Norris was the first to be arrested, albeit on a different charge. Yet the arresting police noticed how terrified he appeared to be while in their custody, and Roy completely caved. Although it was clear that Lawrence was the driving force behind the murders, he admitted that they were both in the habit of driving around the Pacific Coast Highway while hunting for girls to abduct. Shirley Ledford, the only body the police had found by that time, was their fifth and final victim.
5. Oh my god, bro. This what I be saying like to the older generation. I'm be asking like, how do y'all parents let y'all walk around during these times? The 70s and 80s were filled with nothing but serial killers, and you just going places by yourself. Like, oh my god.
The two men had been killing young women all summer long.
Oh my.
Inside the van, the girls would typically be beaten, tied up, then driven to locations deep within the San Gabriel Mountains. There, both Roy and Lawrence would take turns torturing and carnally assaulting their victim before their eventual execution by strangulation. At Lawrence's trial for kidnap and murder, the most haunting and damning piece of evidence presented was the 17-minute clip of an audio tape he'd created.
17 minutes? They tortured her for 17 minutes? Oh my god.
The one which detailed the brutal torture of Shirley Ledford. When it was presented to the jury on January 29th of 1981, prosecutor Stephen Kay warned the jury, "For those of you who don't know what it's like, you're about to find out." Just over 100 people were in the courtroom when it was played, and a huge number of those present openly wept upon hearing it. Some even ran from the courtroom when the screams grew too intense, unable to listen to poor Shirley's screams any longer. Lawrence, on the other hand, smiled when he saw the reaction of the jury. Even a hardened prosecutor like Kay had to walk out at one point, later telling reporters that everybody who has heard that tape has had it affect their lives. "I just picture those girls, how alone they were when they died." Some question if the tape should have been played in court at all, and Lawrence's defense attorney had previously tried to get it banned. But when posed the question, Kay emphatically stated that, "You're darn right it should have been played. The jury needs to know what those guys did."
Oh yeah, he's 100% in the right. Play that in the tape, because the defense, he's trying everything to get them a lesser sentence. I want these niggas to have the death penalty.
At the conclusion of the trial, with Roy Norris already having confessed to his crimes, Lawrence Bittaker attempted to defend himself. He not only claimed that the interaction with Shirley Ledford was entirely consensual, but also that she hadn't...
Consensual? You killed her! Like, is that not clicking? You killed her. Oh yeah, she said she wanted to die, bro. Yeah. She just loves torture, man. She's just addicted to pain. Yeah. It was all consensual. Like, what does that sound like?
...been tortured or killed in his presence. He claimed the last he saw of her was when Roy drove her into the San Gabriel Mountains, which was apparently on her route home.
Come on, nobody's falling for that.
When confronted with the contents of the audio recording, Lawrence claimed it was evidence of nothing more than a particularly boisterous menage a trois. But the jury saw through his sadistic...
See, like, niggas try to use big words, bro. Try to sound smart.
...lies. and found him guilty of 5 counts of first-degree murder, 1 charge of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, 5 charges of kidnapping, 9 charges of carnal assault, 2 charges of forcible oral copulation, 1 charge of sodomy, and 3 charges of unlawful possession of a firearm.
Sodomy? Man, you get charged with sodomy, you're an evil person. You did some evil things. I'm not gonna lie, you did some very evil things.
This proceeded to a judge sentencing Lawrence to death,
There we
whereas
go.
Roy would be up for parole after serving.
What? Hold on. How does one get death and the other one gets parole? That is 2 polar opposites. That is 2 polar opposites. How does one get death and the other one gets a parole option?
30 years of a 45-year sentence.
He doesn't have to serve his full 45? Oh my God. That means he's out now.
It was the rap sheet of a monster, a creature who saw decent human beings as nothing more than just playthings. But the question remained, how did such a vicious predator come to exist in the first place?
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 1940.
Lawrence Sigmund Bittaker was born on September 27th of 1940 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the accidental child of a couple who'd planned not to have children. Shortly after his birth, Lawrence's biological mother gave him up to an orphanage, where he was subsequently adopted by a Mr. and Mrs. George Bittaker. George worked in the aviation industry, an occupation which required frequent relocations around the United States. Fully aware of his adopted status, the transient lifestyle further compounded Lawrence's psychological issues, and by age 12, he had already been convicted of minor larceny in a juvenile court. According to Lawrence, his bad behavior was an attempt to gain more attention from his adopted parents, who he felt starved him for affection. Following a high school aptitude test, Lawrence was found to have an IQ of 138, meaning he was deemed to have an above-average intelligence. But on the whole, he found his education to be tedious and dropped out of high school at 16. At this point in his life, he and his adoptive parents had moved out to...
This is a side tangent, but I feel like once you're 16 years old, there should be no reason you drop out of high school. Unless, like, obviously, like, you get pregnant or something. Like, if you're a woman, like, you get pregnant and you just can't do it, and you have to drop out. I feel like there should be no reason you drop out. Especially at 16, you have 2 more years. You can't just do it for 2 more years. Then you done with school forever. You don't have to, no more classes, no more, just 2 years. I feel like dropping out of high school is insane. But like, the only reason I feel like it's okay to drop out is like this rapper named J Dot. When he was in high school, he had like his ops pull up to the school trying to shoot him at school. That's the only reason I could like see you dropping out of school. Be like, yeah, yeah, you gotta drop out. Cause I get like you don't want to do it, but it's just 2 more years of, you know, it is just, like you 16, just 2 more years, and you done forever. You don't have to worry about getting a GED. Like, yeah, that's already taken just 2 years.
California, where Lawrence added a number of other crimes to his rap sheet, including car theft, a hit and run, and 1 incidence of evading arrest. He spent around a year inside as a result of these crimes, but when he was released from the custody of the California Youth Authority, he found his adopted parents had moved out of state without informing him.
Wow.
They had essentially disowned him, and Lawrence would never see either of them again.
They ditched him.
Upon being abandoned, Lawrence dove headfirst into a life of increasingly serious crimes and spent the next several years in and out of prison. While locked up on robbery charges, a prison psychiatrist was the first to label Lawrence as having highly manipulative tendencies, as well as having considerable concealed hostility. A few years later, Bittaker underwent further examination by 2 independent psychiatrists, both of whom classified him as a borderline psychopath. According to them, Bittaker explained to one of them that his crimes gave him an inflated sense of self-importance, adding that his rough upbringing increased his compulsion to break the law. Bittaker was prescribed antipsychotic medication, but just to A short while after his release, he was involved in the stabbing of a young man, and Lawrence was
I'm not gonna lie. As soon as he got out, he probably stopped taking those medicines. So basically, he's hiding his anger. He's very hostile, very aggressive, and he's highly manipulative. So he's, basically in his mind, he's very sharp and keen, and when he wants to hurt somebody, he can't control himself. A part of him can't control himself, and he can't stop himself from committing these hostile acts.
incarcerated at California Men's Colony in San Luis Obispo. It's there that he met the man with whom he would later terrorize the young women of Southern California, Roy Lewis Norris. Born in February of 1948 to a poor father and drug-addicted mother, Roy was repeatedly placed in the care of foster families throughout his home state of Colorado. One of the most prevalent memories of his childhood were incessant false accusation of misbehavior. He was punished when he was guilty, punished when he was innocent, and was often deprived of food or clothing as a result. This twisted variety of discipline taught Roy that it didn't matter if he was good or bad, so he might as well act in his own self-interest. Consequences be damned. The psychological impact of this is immeasurably destructive and possibly contributed to Roy's series of assaults on women in the years that followed. After the last of these assaults, he was arrested, convicted, then ordered to serve out his sentence at the California Men's Colony in San Luis Obispo, which, as we know, is where he met Lawrence Bittaker. By the time Lawrence arrived in prison, Roy was already associated with a group of hardened criminals from a series of one-percenter motorcycle gangs. Roy later testified that Lawrence had intervened on 2 separate occasions when fellow prisoners had been intending to harm him. This led to the pair becoming fast friends, and after discovering they both held misogynistic views, as well as a mutual interest in carnal violence, they began to plan out their eventual murder spree.
2 villains coming
Their
together.
depraved fantasies involved an elaborate plan to murder one girl of each teenage year from 13 through 19.
That's just, no. That's just, like, I get, like, all he had a rough childhood, but killing teenagers, that has nothing to do with anything. They're just weird.
And after becoming fixated on such a scheme, the pair agreed to put their plan into action following their mutual release from prison. Following his conviction, Lawrence Bittaker granted several interviews from his cell on California's death row. In one of them, he stated that the only remorse he felt was that he'd been caught. And
Hey, at least he honest, bro. No killer really feels remorse. Especially no serial killer actually feels remorse. They only feel remorse when they get caught.
sometimes signed off replies to fan mail with the name Pliers Bittaker.
Fan mail. And that's, bro, I hate when people do this. Like, fan mail to a serial killer is insane.
In the end, Lawrence Bittaker would die of natural causes on December 13th, 2019.
He got lucky.
79.
Roy
Roy Norris also died in prison, passing away at the age of 72 in February of 2020. He too gave several interviews while imprisoned and repeatedly made the claim that Lawrence forced him into participating in the murders. He also claimed to have contemplated reporting their activities to the police, and also that he'd actively worked to dissuade victims from entering the van the pair nicknamed the Murder Mac. "I didn't enjoy killing," he said, but that was Lawrence's favorite part, watching the women struggle to live, knowing he'd soon be taking life away. Yet despite his attempts to defer responsibility, legions of investigators and psychologists have asserted that Roy derived extreme gratification from the domination, abuse, and torture of his victims, and insisted he was just as culpable as Lawrence was. Stephen Kay, the prosecutor at Lawrence's trial, still considers what the media refer to as the Toolbox murders to be the most disturbing criminal case he'd ever handled. He publicly stated that Lawrence Bittaker was more deserving of being executed than any other inmate on California's death row.
100%. 1,000% over.
and that even 2 years after the trial, he was haunted by reoccurring nightmares in which he would be rushing to Bittaker's van to prevent harm coming to the girls, but would always
Wow.
get there too late.
Oh my
Paul
god.
Bynum, the case
Right. Could you like not trying to OD, but could you imagine painting the picture like you trying to sleep and in your dreams you see this van you've been studying for years and you run to the van trying to save lives and you open the van and you're too late and there's a dead body in the van and it's like the dead body screaming at you, why didn't you save me? Why didn't you save me? Every single night. Like that's so crazy to think about.
chief investigator took his own life in December of 1987. In his note, Bynum specifically referred to the murders committed by Bittaker and Norris as haunting him.
He took his, it was so rough, he had to take his own life. Oh my god.
And of his fear that they might hunt him down after being released from prison. The audio cassette detailing the torture of Shirley Ledford's remains in the possession of the FBI Academy and is used to train and desensitize FBI agents to the raw reality of torture and murder. When the courtroom heard those very same tapes, the horror they produced affirmed the Toolbox murders as some of the most sickeningly disturbing in American history. And what's clear is that Lawrence Bittaker knew what he was doing when he chose Halloween as a night to hunt innocent young women.
Bruh. This dude, he just, oh my god.
He knew the date would compound their terror and exacerbate their misery, so much so that he brought along a tape recorder to remember it by.
Hey friends, thanks so much for watching.
Wow. Wow. A lot happened. But justice was served and they got him. But how how brutal what like the case files must have been like having to go through that for the fact that the investigator even took his own life. Because just how much he feared these people. How much like he's seen the lawyers he had dreams 2 years later, nightmares 2 years later about this exact same van. And it's like he has a 17-minute audio player, cassette tape, audio, whatever. I ain't that old. But he has a 17-minute tape recording of this murder. And they play like, oh my god. But that was the Toolbox Killer. A case so brutal it reshaped American law. Let me know how y'all feel about that down below. That being said, I'll see y'all boys later, dude.
I'm not trying to score. Your heart's an open door. I got the key. I'm trying to keep composure and some more. I know you want some more. Oh, oh. Can your body hear me? Want you to feel me?